You know they've got a hell of a band by Stephen King. When Mary woke up, they were lost. She knew it, Clark knew it too. Although he didn't want to admit it at first, he was wearing his "I'm pissed, so don't with me right" look, where his mouth kept getting smaller and smaller until you thought it might disappear altogether. And lost wasn't how Clark would put it. Clark would say they had taken the wrong turn somewhere, and it would just about kill him to even go that far. They'd set off from Portland the day before. Clark worked for a computer company, one of the giants, and it had been his idea that they should go and see something of Oregon, which lay outside of the pleasant but upper middle class suburb of Portland where they lived. An area that was known to its inhabitants as Software City. They say it's beautiful out there in the boonies, he told her. You want to take a look? I've got a week and the transfer rumors have already started. If we don't see some of the real Oregon, I think the last 16 months are going to be nothing but a black hole in my memory. She had agreed willingly enough. School had let out 10 days before, and she had no summer classes to teach, enjoying the pleasantly haphazard feel of the trip, forgetting that spur-of-the-moment vacations often ended up like this, with vacation years lost along some back road which blended its way up an overgrown butt crack of nowhere. It was now an adventure, she supposed. At least she could look at it that way if he wanted it. She just turned 32 in January, and she thought 32 was maybe just a little too old for adventures. These days, her idea of a really good, nice vacation was more like a motel with a clean pool, bathrobes on the beds, and a hairdryer that worked in the bathroom. Yesterday had been fine, though the countryside was gorgeous, and even Clark had several times been awed by the unaccustomed silence. They spent the night at a nice country inn just west of Eugene, and had made love not once but twice, spending something she most definitely was not too old to enjoy. And this morning, had headed south, meaning they spent the night in the Klamath Falls. They had begun the day on Oregon State Highway 58, and that was all right. But then, over lunch, in the town of Oak Ridge, Clark had suggested they get off the main highway, which was pretty well clogged with RVs and logging trucks. Well, I don't know, Mary. Mary spoke with the dubiousness of a woman who had heard many such proposals from her man and endured the consequences of a few. I'd hate to get lost out there, Clark. It looks pretty empty. She had tapped one neatly shaped nail on the spot of the green marked Boulder Creek Wilderness area. The word wilderness, as in no gas stations, no restrooms, and no motels. Oh, come on, he said, pushing aside the chicken fried steak. On the juke, Steve Earle and the Dukes are singing. 6 days on the road, holy shit. And outside the dirt-streaked windows, a bunch of bored-looking kids were doing turns and pop-outs on their skateboards. They looked as if they were just marking time out there, waiting to be old enough to blow this town for good. And Mary knew exactly how they felt. Nothing to it, babe. We take 58 a few miles east and turn south on State Road 42. See it? Uh-huh. She also saw that while Highway 58 was a fat red line state road, 42 was only a squiggle of black thread. But she had been full of meatloaf and mashed potatoes and hadn't wanted to argue with Clark's pioneering instinct while she felt like a boa constrictor that has just swallowed a goat. What she wanted, in fact, was to tilt back in the passenger seat of their lovely old Mercedes and take a snooze. Then he pushed on. There's this road here. It's not numbered, so it's probably only a county road, but it goes right to town to Toki Falls. And from there, it's like a hop and a jump over to US 97. So what do you think? That you'll probably get us lost, she said. A wisecrack she rather regretted later. But I guess we'll be all right as long as you find a place wide enough to turn the princess around in. Sold American, he said, beaming, and pulled up his chicken fried steak back in front of him. He began to eat again, congealed gravy and all. Yuckadoo, she said, holding a hand up in front of her face, wincing. How can you? It's good. It's good, Clark said, in tones so muffled only a wife beside him could understand. When one is traveling, one should eat the native dishes. It looks like someone sneezed a mouthful of snuff onto every old hamburger, she said. I repeat, yuckadoo. They left Oak Ridge in good spirits, and at first all had been going swimmingly. Trouble hasn't set in until they turned off of SR 42 and onto the unmarked road. The one Clark had been so sure was going to breeze them into the right, into Tokati Falls. I think I've been saying that wrong. It hadn't seemed like trouble at first. County road or not, the new way had been a lot better than Highway 42, which had been potholed and frost-heavied even in the summer. They had gone along famously, in fact, taking turns plugging in tapes into the dash player. Clark was into people like Wilson Pickett, Al Green, and Pop Staples. Mary's taste lied in a completely different direction. What do you see in all of these white boys, he asked, as he plugged in her favorite Lou Reed's New York. Married one, didn't I? She asked, and that made him laugh. The first sign of trouble came 15 minutes later. When they came to a fork in the road, both forks looked equally promising. Holy crap, Clark said, pulling up and popping the glove compartment open so he can get a look at the map. He looked at it for a long time. That isn't on the map. "Oh boy, here we go," Mary said. She had been on the edge of a doze when Clark pulled up to the unexpected fork, and she was feeling a little irritated with him. "Want my advice?" "No," he said, sounding a little irritated with himself. "But I suppose I'll get it. And I hate it when you roll your eyes at me. That way, in case you didn't know." "What way is that, Clark?" "Like I was an old dog that just farted under the dinner table. Go on, tell me what you think. Lay it on me. It's your nickel. Go back while there's still time, and that's my advice." "Uh-huh. Now, if you only had a sign that said, 'Repent,' is that supposed to be funny?" "I don't know, Mayor," he said in a glum tone of voice. And that just sat there. And then just sat there, alternating looks through a bug-splattered windshield with a close examination of the map. They had been married for almost 15 years. Mary knew him well enough to believe he almost certainly insisted on pushing on, in spite of the unexpected fork in the road, but because of it. When Clark Willingham's balls are on the line, he doesn't back down, she thought, and then put a hand over her mouth to hide the grin that surfaced. She was not quite quick enough. Clark glanced at her, one eyebrow raised, and she was suddenly discomforted. And she had a sudden discomforting thought. If she could read him as easily as a child's book after all this time, maybe he could do the same with her. "Something?" he asked, his voice a little too thin. It was at that moment, even before she had fallen asleep, she now realized that his mouth started to get smaller. "Want to share, sweetheart?" She shook her head. "Just clearing my throat." He nodded, pushing his glasses up on his ever-expanding forehead, and brought the map up until it almost touched the tip of his nose. "Well," he said, "it's gotta be the left-hand fork, because that's the one that goes south, towards Tokati Falls. The other one heads east. That's probably the ranch road or something." "A ranch road with a yellow line running down the middle of it?" Clark's mouth grew a little smaller. "You'd be surprised how well off some of these ranchers are," he said. He thought of pointing She thought of pointing out to him that the days of scouts and pioneers were long gone, and that that his testicles were not actually on the line, and then decided she wanted to doze off. She wanted a little doze off in the afternoon sun, a lot more than she wanted to squabble with her husband, especially after a lovely double-featured night. And after all, they were bound to come out somewhere, weren't they? With the comforting thought in her mind and Lou Reed in her ears singing about the last great American whale, Mary Willingham dozed off. By the time the road Clark had picked began to deteriorate, she was sleeping shallowly and dreaming that they were back in Oak Ridge Cafe, where they had eaten lunch. She was trying to put a quarter into the jukebox, into the coin slot. She was trying to put the quarter into the jukebox, but the coin slot was plugged with something that looked like flesh. One of the kids who had been outside of the parking lot, walking past her with a skateboard underneath his arm, and his Trailblazers hat turned around on his head. "What's the matter with this thing?" Mary asked him. The kid came over, took a look, and shrugged. "Ah, it ain't nothing," he said. "That's just some guy's body, broken for you and for many. This is no rinky-dink operation we got here. We're talking mass culture. We're talking mass culture, sugar muffin." Then he reached up and gave the tip of her right breast a tweak. "It's not a friendly one either, not a very friendly one either," and walked away. She looked back at the jukebox and saw it was filled up with blood and shadowy floating things that looked suspiciously like human organs. "Maybe you better give that Lou Reed album a rest," she thought. Maybe you better give that Lou Reed album a rest, she thought. And within the pool of blood behind the glass, a record floated down into the turntable. As if at her thought, Lou Reed began to sing Busload of Faith. While Mary was having this steadily more unpleasant dream, the road continued to worsen, patches spreading until it was all patch. The Lou Reed album, a long one, came to an end and began to recycle. Clark didn't notice. The pleasant look he had started the day with was entirely gone. His mouth shrunk to the size of a rosebud. If Mary had been awake, she would have coaxed him into turning around miles back. He knew this, just as he knew how she would look at him if she woke up and saw this narrow swatch of crumbling hot top, a road only one thought in the most charitable terms. With piney woods pressed in close enough on both sides to keep the patched tar in a constant shadow, they had not passed a car headed in other directions since leaving SR-42. He knew that he should turn around. Mary hated it when he got into shits like this, always forgetting the many times he had found his way unerringly along strange roads to their unplanned destination. Clark Willingham was one of those millions of American men who are firmly convinced that they have a compass in their heads. But he continued to push on, at first stubbornly convinced they must come out into Tokati Falls, then just hoping. Besides, there was really no place to turn around. If he tried to do it, he would mirror the princess hubcaps in one of those marshy ditches which bordered this miserable excuse of a road, and God knew how long it would take to get a tow truck up there, and how far they'd have to walk just to call one. Then at last, he did come to a place where he could have turned around, another fork in the road. and elected not to do so. The reason was simple. Although the right fork was rutted gravel and the grass growing up the middle and leftward tending branch was wide again, well paved, and divided by a bright stroke of yellow. According to the compass in Mark and Clark's head, this fork headed due south. He could all but smell Toketee Falls. 10 miles, maybe 15, 20 at the outside. He did at least consider turning back. However, when Mary told him to do so later, he saw doubt in her eyes, but it was true. He decided to go on because Mary was beginning to stir, and he was quite sure that the bumpy, potholed stretch of the road had just driven would wake her up if he turned back. And then she would look at him with those wide, beautiful blue eyes of hers. Just look. That will be enough. Besides, why should he spend an hour and a half going back when Toketee Falls was just a spin and a promise away? Look at the road, he thought. You think a road like this is going to just peter out? He put the princess back into gear and started down the left fork, and sure enough, the road petered out. Over the first hill, the yellow line disappeared again. Over the second, the paving gave out, and they were on a rutted dirt track with dark woods pressing even closer on either side of the road in the sun. Clark was aware of this for the first time. Now sliding down the wrong side of the sky, the pavement ended too suddenly for Clark to brake, and baby the princess onto the new surface, and there had been a hard spring-jarred thud that woke Mary. She sat up with a jerk and looked around with wide eyes. Where? She began, and then, to make the afternoon utterly perfect and complete, the smoky voice of Lou Reed sped up until it gambled out in the lyrics, jabbling out the lyrics to Good Evening, Mr. Weldon? At the speed of Alvin and the Chipmunks. Oh, she said, and punched the eject button. The tape blinked out, following an ugly brown afterbirth of coils of shiny tape. The princess hit a nearly bottomless pothole, lurched hard to the left, and then threw herself up and out like a clipper ship corkscrewing through a storm wave. Clark, don't say anything, he said through clenched teeth. We're not lost. This would just turn into tar again in a minute or two, and probably over the next hill. We're not lost. Still upset by her dream, even though she could not quite remember what it had been, Mary held the ruined tape in her lap, mourning it. She supposed she could buy another one, but not here. She looked at the brooding trees, which seemed to belly up right to the road, like starving guests at a banquet, and guessed it was a long way to the nearest tower records. She looked at Clark, noting his flushed cheeks and nearly non-existent mouth, and decided it would be politic to keep her own mouth shut, at least for the time being. If she was quiet and non-accusatory, he would become more likely to come to his senses before this miserable excuse for a road petered out onto the gravel pit or a quicksand bog. Besides, I can't very well turn around, he said, as if she suggested the thing. I can see that, she replied neutrally. He glanced at her, perhaps wanting to fight, perhaps just feeling embarrassed and hoping to see she wasn't too pissed at him, at least not yet, and then looked back through the windshield. Now there were weeds and grass growing up from the center of this road too. The way was so narrow that if they did happen to meet another car, one of them would have to back up. Nor was that the end of the fun. The ground beyond the wheel ruts looked increasingly untrustworthy. The scrubby trees seemed to be jostling each other for a position on the wet ground. So what are we feeling? Do we like it? Did I stutter too much? Did we get the gist of what I was saying? Should I slow it down? Should I also just change anything about it? I enjoyed it. It was rather more difficult editing this time because I made so many mistakes. But yeah, man, definitely one of those videos that I'd love to do again. And if not, just finish this story with you guys. It doesn't seem like it's going to be long because the last one was pretty decently long, but we'll see. And if you guys, mess with this style of content, I'll definitely do it for you. I love reading, scary short stories, and watching them be made into a scene is really engaging, and it just helps you to see how somebody else interprets, what you're being told. It's kind of cool. Let me know how you feel about the way that he writes as well. Since he is an older author, he has a lot of old terminology, and it's fine. I don't mind. That's why I tried to draw an older car and make it look like there were other people that drove on this road before. Like, it's not just totally abandoned, but the streets are kind of light. And since I don't know how the story ends, I want it to be a possibility that maybe they've done this before. Maybe somebody else is like leading them to their doom. You know, I have no idea. So I just wanted to leave the possibility and the visual of this story going on. But so far, I've only gotten a couple pages more than that, and I don't really remember what those are, so I'm just going to restart from where we left off, and then probably record that and get the next image up to you, and if not, make them quicker, because this took way too long, and I didn't know how I wanted the atmosphere to look, because I used references for Arizona, Oregon, and stuff like that. But anyways, it was still really fun. I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about, you know, the 90s in Oregon doing this video. If you enjoyed, please engage with me. I am not a robot. I love talking to you guys, and when you guys gas me up, it's literally the brightest part of my day, so please engage with me. I'd love to talk to you as well. I'm gonna stop there. I didn't have a story to tell, so I decided to read the book that I've been reading. Surprisingly enough, I was only 2 pages off from when I last read it, so you guys are pretty much up to speed with me. I hope that you enjoyed. If you have a good instinct, well, we'll see. We'll see for next time what happens with our good instincts. Go enjoy your lifetime and loved ones, and I'll see ya.